Good evening, I'm Samantha John, and this is the C News Report at 7. Thank you for choosing us. In the headlines, a year after Dana Sitahal's murder, her family is still pained and wait for justice. A grieving husband believes his pregnant wife could have been saved if an ambulance was available. A new Children's Authority Board is installed. Maxi taxi drivers received their rebate. In the Worldview, U.S. authorities identified the Texas cartoon attackers. And in sport, Kevin Molino is out for the season. Jassy?
Yes, it's bad news for the Soca Warrior star Samantha, but he's looking ahead and not back, hoping to rebound stronger. After a poor series, English batsman Jonathan Trott ends his international career, but could Chanderpaul follow suit? And Steph Curry is the NBA's MVP. I'll have more on these stories later on in sport.
Wow, what a hot day, Ian.
Well, that's right. Yet another 34 degrees Celsius, and it was mainly dry as well. Piarco got not a drop, so count yourself lucky if you got a brief shower yesterday. In terms of the forecast, I'll give you more when I return. Samantha?
1 year ago today, the nation woke up to tragic news. Senior counsel Dana Sitahal had been murdered execution style. Ms. Sitahal was assassinated while driving her Volkswagen SUV in the vicinity of the Woodbrook Youth Facility on Hamilton Holder Street. Members of her family are still having difficulty coping with their loss. Up to now, her siblings still wait anxiously for the police to call and let them know that they've found the ones responsible for their grief. C News reporter Mahalia Joseph spoke to two of Ms. Sitahal's siblings, Suzanne Francois and Omar Sitahal, on Saturday before a one-year memorial service in Tunapuna.
It's been a long day without you, my friend.
Suzanne Francois, the younger sister of Dana Sitahal, said the pain of the immediate family's loss is as fresh as 1 year ago, and she feels the anger brewing inside her as the days go by.
In many ways, today is even more difficult than 51 weeks ago. My nieces and nephews, they especially had a hard time, missing her terribly. On any day, there would be phone calls from her.
She says it's in poor taste that up to this day, the family are still not regularly briefed on the progress of the investigations.
We know little more than in fact, we know less than what the media knows, because everything that we know comes from the media. What we see in the newspapers, what we hear on the news, that's where we get our information.
But of course, one major comfort to the family would be closure.
Those killers, the person who paid for it, the persons who planned it, the persons who carried out the act, all those who benefited from this crime, that they be found, that they be charged, and that they be brought to trial and convicted.
Omar Sitahal, the senior counsel's younger brother, says he misses the advice and laughs he once shared with his sister.
I don't think I've been coping too well. You know, you're under stress. You keep on thinking about this. And you keep on hoping that some closure will come along, you know, who won why, and BF1, that sort of thing. And I know Dina also, she was working very hard, extremely hard at the time of her death. And she had a lot of things that she had in the frying pan, things that a lot of people were hoping would have come to fruition.
His hope is to find out who decided to kill his sister and not the man who pulled the trigger, and added that he too is not satisfied with the way the investigation is progressing.
And not only because Jada is my sister, but because this is a sort of model case, a case of people all over, not only in Trinidad, the Caribbean, look at her case as a case of how can justice be given to people who need it.
Mahalia Joseph, C News.
On the eve of the anniversary of Dana Sitahal's assassination, a group of concerned citizens as well as relatives of the slain attorney gathered outside the Hall of Justice to hold a candlelight vigil in the late senior counsel's honor. Cameraman Ricky Gokul and journalist Peter Christopher were on hand as the group lamented the apparent lack of justice 1 year later.
Mere hours before it officially became a year since Special State Prosecutor Dana Sita Hall was murdered, a group of concerned citizens gathered in front of the Hall of Justice in her honor. Present for the gathering were MSJ political leader David Abdullah, former government minister Mary King, as well as representatives from social activist group Speak Out TNT. While the location represented a place where the senior counsel had done much of her work for the country, the group bemoaned the lack of justice that had followed since her passing.
I think it's a very sad day when we can stand up hours before the year anniversary of her murder and not have anything. Have what we are given by the police as things that we heard a couple months afterwards, recycled as if it's new information.
Gillian Wall, the founder of Powerful Women of Trinidad and Tobago, called on the population not to forget the senior counsel, like they had done several other atrocious crimes which have occurred in the country. She also responded to criticism that they only lobbied in this case due to Ms. Sita Hall's prominence. To this, she retorted that this case in particular had wider-reaching implications for the public's faith in law enforcement.
Dana understood the risk of people not having confidence in the system. That is what you should fear the most. Not having confidence in the system will allow the criminal elements to roam free. Because the parties that we need to speak up will continue to fear the very system that should be protecting them.
Vision on Mission founder Wayne Chance also joined in the call for justice, as he remembered Dana Sita Hall as a person who always lent her support to his cause.
She told me she liked what we was doing and so forth. And whenever we need legal advice and support, she was always ready. She'd write letters on our behalf. She would call me after a show and tell me she liked the point. She'd give us certain advice on topics and stuff like that. So she had developed a real close place with us.
The senior counsel's sister, Susan Francois, was the first to light a candle on the night. But she, like most of those gathered on Sunday night, are hoping that another year will not pass with the attorney's killers still at large. Peter Christopher, C News.
And the call for justice in Dana Sita Hall's murder continues to be made not only by her family. Speaking today on Good Morning Trinidad and Tobago, criminal defense attorney Fareed Ali said while citizens need to continue to have faith in the justice system, he hoped Dana Sita Hall's murder was not a cold case.
To have faith in the police and the processes that they've engaged. I am concerned that we're at a point where the public needs information. And when I listened to the commissioner speak, and having spoken on last Thursday, he spoke in generic terms. He never really identified that there were clear suspects.
Meanwhile, attorney-at-law Chrislyn Moore lashed out at the police service, calling for more to be done to solve Ms. Sita Hall's case.
Really, the message that is resounding through the community or through the society is that whether you're a person of great importance or a person who only your neighbors know, it apparently makes no difference in the police's inability to solve major crime regarding you. And that is quite devastating. It speaks to a measure of hopelessness, and I sincerely hope that the police service in particular are aware that some inspiration is needed from that quarter.
Freedom, opinions, decisions. It's now time for the C News poll.
Only last week, the acting commissioner Williams said that police were actively pursuing the Dana Sita Hall case. But as you heard, her family plead for justice. So we ask you, do you believe Dana Sita Hall's murder has become a cold case? Text your answer, vote yes or vote no, and send it to 4913. We'll give you the results at the end of our newscast. The husband of Valerie McBurney Taylor, who died on her way to San Fernando General Hospital on Saturday, believes his wife could have been saved if an ambulance was dispatched to his aid. Jason Taylor told the media at the Forensic Science Center today he transported his wife in a wheelbarrow from their home to get a car to take her to the Point Fortin Hospital in an attempt to save her and their unborn babies. Ian Wason has more.
Jason Taylor lost his wife and two unborn children on Saturday. His grief compounded by his disappointment in the system that failed to deliver an ambulance to help his 7-month pregnant wife in her time of need. Taylor told us he used a wheelbarrow to transport Valerie to get to her car so they could get to the Point Fortin area hospital.
A wheelbarrow. Check the thing, is a wheelbarrow. I had to push my wife in a wheelbarrow. And that is not nice, to knowing that a wheelbarrow pushing a lady who pregnant with her twins, right? Her twins, when somebody call the ambulance for twins, I think they should get respond.
No ambulance also meant there were no paramedics on hand to administer emergency care, which forced the distraught husband to take matters into his own hands. Looking back at last Saturday's events, he sees the significance of having working ambulances at any health institution.
People could sick anywhere, and once there is a hospital, there should be an ambulance. Because without the ambulance, people cannot survive. And my wife died from a cause of the ambulance cost, because they tell me what to do, but I could not keep up with them.
The autopsy of Valerie McBurney Taylor was not done on Monday as expected. Before the autopsy, the family was told the medical notes from the San Fernando General Hospital were needed. They will return to the Sciences Complex on Tuesday. Ian Wason, C News.
The government is being advised not to rush ahead with election campaigning financing legislation. This from United Nations Development Program Officer Charles Chauvel. The advice came following the 4th public hearing of the Election Campaigning Financing Committee at Monday's Joint Select Committee meeting. Charlene Lewis has the details.
Millions of dollars are spent on election campaigning, and it's expected that a whopping $330 million could be spent in the upcoming general election. This according to EBC Chairman Norbert Masson, who also called for election campaigning financing reform. Following the EBC's chairman call was a private member's motion which was moved by independent Senator Helen Drayton. She called for a joint select committee to look into the matter of election campaigning financing. Once established, the committee wrote the UNDP, Election and Boundaries Commission, and the Organization of American States for expert advice, following which a committee headed by UNDP Representative Charles Chauvel was set up to come up with proposals for the election campaigning financing legislation. The committee met Monday for the 4th time. The meeting was to discuss recommendations from representatives of the United Nations Development Program, from New Zealand and the United States. The intent of the legislation is aimed at governing the financing of election campaigning. The purpose of hearing the recommendations from the UNDP members was to review and perhaps accept international approaches to election campaigning financing. UNDP Representative Charles Chauvel cautioned the government against rushing such a legislation and made the following recommendations which he said should be included in the legislation: contribution and expenditure, reporting and disclosure, participation and empowerment, and consultation. The committee has to submit on or before Thursday, May 7th, their proposals to both Houses of Parliament for consideration. Charlene Lewis, C News.
Maxi taxi drivers received their rebate checks today from the Minister of Transport, Stephen Cadiz. The first check distribution ceremony took place at the ministry's headquarters at the waterfront complex. As Melissa Dasrath tells us, Mr. Cadiz assured more customer-friendly transactions at the licensing office is coming soon.
The Ministry of Transport is making good on a promise made by the PNM administration to give maxi taxi drivers a 15% rebate on the cost of upgrading to a 25-seater maxi taxi. 10 years after the rebate agreement, these maxi drivers finally received their checks.
That the then administration agreed to do a rebate on the motor vehicle taxes that would have been paid. And a number of owners went ahead and invested in these larger maxis, and of course the rebate never came through. And what we have done here today is to correct that particular situation.
20 maxi taxi drivers received their checks on Monday, but the ministry promises more to come as they speedily process close to 300 rebate applications. A member of the Route 2 Maxi Taxi Association that operates along the PBR from Arima, Carl Gaskin, was thankful that the current regime brought closure to this outstanding issue.
This check is welcome, but owning a big maxi is a challenge. The cost is very high, the maintenance is high and ongoing, and I mean, we really need to put this to good use, such as that every member would receive what they're supposed to, they would get their rebate, and we continue good relationship we have with the ministry.
Addressing other concerns of motorists, the line minister also said the Motor Vehicle Authority will be up and running soon and should improve the efficiency of operations at the licensing office in Port of Spain and San Fernando.
We're looking at when you go in to get your permits renewed, etc. Again, this is not going to take weeks and months for transfers, for new driving permits, etc., etc. That it will be operated as a business, and therefore the level of customer service that you're going to be seeing with the MVA is going to be a first for Trinidad and Tobago, I think. We have obviously the new facility going up in Caroni that is 97% completed. We have the legislation in the Senate. We will be going to Senate not tomorrow but next week Tuesday to complete the debate in the Senate, and we hope to have it passed at that time.
The minister added that accommodations for maxi taxis at the Citygate terminals will also be improved for greater comfort and convenience and reduce chaos for the traveling public. Melissa Dasrath, C News.
A bushfire in the Maloney area has been burning out of control. The fire is said to be opposite the National Science Center. Roger Dwarka and cameraman Rodney David came upon the fire as they were heading east. Roger says the fire seems to be in a potentially dangerous area.
We're on the side of Maloney. It's about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and you can just see this is a sign saying buried natural gas pipeline. You can just look behind me. This is absolutely huge fire behind us. No authorities, no fire truck or anything has actually come to actually deal with it. I'm just going to walk a little bit backwards here just to give you an extent of the fire there. You can just see it's there. It's a bushfire. It's burning out of control. It's absolutely huge. Very, very black clouds there, and yet it's still burning. Nobody's come along so far.
And we'd like to apologize for the volume there on that video. That was very dramatic indeed. For more on these and other stories, visit our CNews website at ctntworld.com. And you can also keep up to date with the latest stories on Facebook and Twitter at CNews Live. Still to come, the Energy Minister addresses the Moody's downgrade of government's downgrade and issuer rating. Stay with us. Welcome back. The date has not been announced as yet, but already the election fever is beginning to build. Tonight, the People's Partnership has headed to the east at the Guaico Government Secondary School. Roger Dwarka is there. Roger, what can you tell us?
Yes, indeed. As you probably know, Sam, we're here in the Guaico Secondary School in San Grande Toco constituency. We were having a chat earlier with the Minister of National Security. We were trying to feed it down the line. We didn't get a signal, but we will be feeding that later. What he said to us was that in this area, of course, the UNC, the People's Partnership, are trying to cement their position here. Of course, you can just dip in right now, and you can probably see Colin Partap, who is one of the former MPs here, I should say, rather, talking right now. Now, just to reveal a little bit of information that we got from the Minister of National Security, and we're breaking this live on CNews. He said to us that they're actually going to build a Coast Guard base somewhere further on from Chaguaramas and one down in Seagra. So that's exclusive to CNMG this afternoon. We're going to feed that down to you later. I believe we're going to dip into Colin Partap, who is speaking right now, Sam.
There are people employed in local government, and your jobs are on the line when the PNM comes in. Do you want your jobs to go? Do you want your jobs to go? No! He said also his first order of business is to raise his salary, but yours will remain the same. Is that a leader that you can trust? Is that a leader that you want? No.
And we'll join Roger a bit later on for the People's Partnership Monday Night Forum. An assurance from the Energy Minister, Kevin Ramnarine, that there's no relationship between Moody's downgrade and Trinidad and Tobago's ability to attract foreign investment. Commenting on international credit rating agency Moody's Investor Services' decision to downgrade this country's government bond and issue a rating from Baa1 to Baa2, Minister Ramnarine said while this country remains a gas exporting country, the unfair ratings by Moody did not take into consideration the other revenue earners for the country.
This is really a gas-based economy, and oil accounts for a portion of our revenue, but most of our revenue in energy comes from the energy sector, from natural gas, and we have been getting attracting significant investment into the energy sector.
Minister Ramnarine said Trinidad and Tobago's ability to invest with foreign countries isn't going to change based on a quarterly rating.
In the history of this country, since we gained independence in 1962, this country has never defaulted on foreign debt. This country has always honored and obligated, it has always honored its foreign debt. We've always serviced our foreign debt, and that is not going to change.
The leader of the opposition, Dr. Keith Rowley, says he's unsatisfied with the government's response to the Moody's Investors Service report done on Friday. The international credit rating agency downgraded this country's government bond and issuer ratings from Baa1 to Baa2.
And this is a very worrisome development. And against this background, we go forward with a downgrade, a central bank that is being looked at in a certain way, a government that is trying to fool the population that this development is no big thing. And by next week, Friday, I expect to hear them blame the PNM for this development.
The Minister of Trade, Industry, Investment and Communications, Vasant Bharat, responded to Dr. Rowley's claims that the government has not responded to the Moody's report adequately. He said Dr. Rowley was trying to scare the public into believing that there's a crisis.
We felt that Mr. Rowley's response over the weekend, I think it may have been Saturday, was purely opportunistic from the perspective that he was attempting to create some form of scaremongering. But that is in keeping with Dr. Rowley and his propensity to try to scare the public or create fear.
And during Dr. Rowley's news conference, he told reporters that in August 2009, Vasant Bharat, who was an MP at the time and the then opposition leader in the Senate, Wade Mark, had approached Standard & Poor's to request that they downgrade Trinidad and Tobago in their report.
Opposition leader in the Senate, Wade Mark, and Mr. Vasant Bharat met with Standard & Poor's and virtually demanded that Trinidad and Tobago be downgraded in the evaluation of our sovereign rating.
Mr. Bharat has denied the claims by Dr. Rowley. He said neither he nor the Speaker of the House, Wade Mark, had ever approached any rating agency.
No time did we seek any of the rating agencies to give Trinidad and Tobago a poor rating. I want to make that perfectly clear. That would be absolutely unpatriotic, which is what Dr. Rowley is attempting to do today. He's attempting to scare the population into believing things are worse and ensuring that, if he could possibly help it, that could hinder foreign direct investment or internal investment in Trinidad and Tobago by the scaremongering that he's attempting to generate.
And here's a recap of our main headlines. A year after Dana Sitahal's murder, her family is still pained and wait for justice. A grieving husband believes his pregnant wife could have been saved if an ambulance was available. A new Children's Authority Board is installed. And maxi taxi drivers received their rebate. And Jassy is here with a look at what's to come in sport, but we're going to talk about that fight.
Of course, the world is still talking about it. It's a fight that some people expected to be an all-out brawl. Some are confused, some angry, some still rejoicing about the result. Certainly wasn't a brawl, but it was definitely a tactical masterclass by Mayweather. He came out on top and is now 48 fights undefeated. But we're dealing with something hitting a little bit closer to home tonight, and that's Kevin Molino's season-ending injury. I'll have details of that and more right after the break. Welcome back. It's time for sport. We have football first up, and Trinidad and Tobago's Gold Cup chances were dealt a major blow when Soca Warriors standout Kevin Molino suffered a season-ending injury on Saturday. Orlando City announced today that Molino tore the anterior cruciate ligament in his right knee during a friendly match against Brazilian club Ponte Preta. Additional tests in the coming weeks will determine the full extent of the injury, but Molino is expected to undergo surgery and will miss the remainder of the 2015 MLS season. He was expected to also feature prominently in the Gold Cup in the United States for Trinidad and Tobago, but senior team coach Stephen Hart has said the Gold Cup is less important than his ability to return to the game at the most appropriate time, end quote. Since the injury, Molino has also been optimistic and stated, "It's devastating, but this is the game. I've known players who've had serious knee injuries before, like Carlos Edwards, Kenwin Jones, and Cornel Glenn, and they all came back from it. By the grace of God, hopefully, I will be able to bounce back and be able to continue my career," end quote. Certainly wishing him a speedy recovery. Now, closing your season with a win is cause to pat yourself on the back in any sporting realm. But for St. Anne's Rangers of the TT Pro League, there was cause for extra celebration on Friday when they defeated the Defence Force. Rangers had not a single win before Friday night and collected only 2 points all season. And for once, the free-scoring Devon Jostling could not save the Army. A congratulatory handshake to Ron Laforet, who after taking over almost midway in the season, coached St. Anne's Rangers to their first win in their final TT Pro League fixture. Before the kickoff, the focus was certainly on the opposite team, as Devon Jostling chased his own league record of 21 goals. Josling's mission, though, was put on ice while Rangers crafted this goal. On 42 minutes, Cedale McLean picked the run of David Williams, who did the rest. But as they have done so often, Rangers broke apart. And in first half stoppage time, Jostling moved from 20 goals to 21, equaling his previous season's best. Rangers regrouped for the second half, and with a bit of luck scored again in the 83rd minute from Said Freitas' speculative shot. The final whistle could not come quickly enough as Rangers closed the season with 21 defeats, 2 drawn results, and 1 win cemented at the bottom of the table. San Juan Jablete also had a similar kind of giant-killing evening, but they had to come from behind against the league runners-up W Connection. Jarrell Brito scored in the 11th and 27th minutes to put the dethroned champions on cruise control. However, Jablete, seeking a finish higher up the standings themselves, had Johan Peltier to thank for their first-half comeback.
Number 9, Johan Peltier.
The younger Peltier brothers scored one and made one, as in winning this penalty he caused W Connection captain Mikhail Williams to be yellow-carded and then red-carded for dissent. Andy Reid rubbed salt into those wounds from the spot. And the turnaround was completed in the 76th as Tyrone Charles chimed in, and Jablete had a 3-2 win. Abroad, Chelsea might have clinched their English Premiership title over the weekend, but the Gunners of Arsenal drew level with its second place Manchester City following another win over Hull City, who are desperate for a win to ease their own relegation fears.
Yorkshiremen went into the game fifth from bottom, hoping to beat the dreaded drop. Disaster for them, though, when Alexis Sanchez's free kick flies into the back of the net via a huge deflection. More where that came from. Aaron Ramsey made it 2-0 thanks to another deflection. No chance for the keeper. And it was 3-0 before half-time. Sanchez finishing off a really slick move around the keeper. In she pops to the back of the net, 3-1. Final score there in Yorkshire. Now, we all know Chelsea are the champs, but the results seen the Gunners move to 70 points points now. That's level with the now outgoing champions Manchester City. The North Londoners do have a game in hand as well. 9 wins and a draw for them from their last 10. Meantime, Burnley and QPR are all but down. The third spot will likely go to Sunderland, Leicester or Hull, who stay on 34 points, just 1 point above the Black Cats.
Taking it over to the gentlemen's game, and there is another call for the sacking of Shivnarine Chanderpaul. This time it's from the former West Indies all-rounder Philo Wallace, who believes that the sun has set on the cricketing career of the Guyanese left-hander.
A decision has to be made on Chanderpaul. If Chanderpaul is not man enough to make that decision, the selectors will have to make that decision for him. I said previously that we'll give him 5 test matches, so he has 2 more to go against Australia, and then I believe Chanderpaul should call it quits. We're seeing the effects of being a senior player at that age at international cricket. Stroke and Jimmy Anderson, those guys are not going to bowl a lot of half volleys. They're going to make Chanderpaul work for his runs. As we saw, they made him work for his runs. And he looked out of sorts. He's slower. Obviously, at 40 years old, he's slowing down. He's still an asset. But how big an asset is him? Yesterday showed me that Bravo and Blackwood, given the opportunity, those guys can lead or bat in.
Wallace said that after batting failures against South Africa and in the regional 4-day tournament, as well as now against England, it was time for Chanderpaul to call it a day and let the younger ones carry on. Wallace also expressed optimism in the youngsters who stepped up to the challenge in the England series and was impressed by the leadership he saw from captain Dinesh Ramdin.
If you look at the way how they played in the series, starting from Antigua, they played really well. We saw discipline, we saw commitment, and we saw guys fighting for a cause, and I'm happy for him to see that he's worked really hard. He got the field places right, the bowling changes right, and it all worked out well for him.
And a part of the fallout from the tied series with the West Indies for the tourists going forward, several players could be omitted. Today, England batsman Jonathan Trott offered himself up by retiring from international cricket. Having left last year's Ashes series with a stress-related illness, Trott was making a return to England's test team on the tour of the West Indies after leaving, but only managed 72 runs in 6 innings. He said while delighted to have returned to the international game, he doesn't believe his game is at the level needed to play for England, and with another Ashes series right around the corner, it gives the selectors a chance to groom another batsman. Trott retires with 3,835 runs in 52 test matches, 2 successful Ashes campaigns, and was also named the ICC's Player of the Year for 2011. Cycling now, and the men's keirin held center stage at the 3rd night of the National Cycling Championships in Arima. Jody Goodridge had earlier led an Arima wheeler sweep of the elite ladies event, while the junior girls crown went to Bikesmith's Kiana Lester, and the junior men's equivalent went to Say Daniel, also from Arima wheelers. But all eyes were focused on this one, where some of the fastest men in the land were on hand to compete for the national title, and fresh from his capture of the sprint title, Josiane Phillips was positioned second from last, with his main rival Quincy Alexander hugging his wheel the whole journey. It was every man for himself once the motorbike left the track, and they later took the bell with the positions unchanged. All eyes still on Philip, who was chasing the double. He made his move early and clobbered the field with one ridiculous burst of speed that saw him slingshot to the front, never to be caught. And even though the others came late, Alexander had to fight to hold off Tracy Brown, who filled 3rd, and Alexander's DPS teammate Jude Quadrington was 4th. Josiane again stamping his class. To some basketball, UTC stretched their unbeaten run in the North Zone basketball tournament to 4 games with an 80-67 win over the defending champions Straker Nets. Ian Wason, of course, was there at the Jean Pierre Complex, where Patrick Scipio and Jeffrey Harris again carried UTT's scoring.
The game started with high intensity, but it was Straker who got things rolling when Sadiki Guerra hit this 3 to kick things off. But Patrick Scipio will answer back with this long 3 almost immediately. He led all scorers with 26 points. And he would raise the roof with this reverse slam. And by the way, this is not the NBA. In the 3rd quarter, Straker trailing by 10, Kerry McMillan scored this 3 to make it 41-48. Jeffrey Harris scored 18 points for UTT, 2 coming here, getting the up and under off the glass. Guerra scored this 3 late in the game to finish with 14 points, but the writing was already on the wall, as UTT made it 4 straight, while Straker lost 3 of 4.
Yes, teamwork, team cohesion is the main aspect of our team, offensively and defensively. We know Straker is a veteran team, so we have to come out and stick to our game plan, and teamwork is our game plan, and it worked out for us. Offensively, in terms of being in sync, Our flow of our offense is kind of sticky, and we had to work on the turnovers, too many turnovers.
Now it's time to get together and see if we can come out in the next game and build on what we did in the second half of the game to the next game.
UTT topped the standings, followed by Caledonia Clippers, who beat Pistons on Sunday to also remain unbeaten. Ian Wilson, C Sports.
A National Futsal League is on its way, and this is according to head coach of the national team, Clayton Morris. The 10-team league will begin on May 16th and conclude in July. Kent Fuentes spoke to the former strike squad captain earlier today.
Morris says the 10 teams will be chosen by the staff of the national team, with players placed in clubs rather than be chosen by one, and explain the reasoning behind this decision.
We select the players, well, some of the guys who were in the 2004 and 2008 teams, we have them split around the 10 teams so that we would have a league with these players. Why we went this way is because when we look at the first screening session, there are a lot of the people who showed up to play, they weren't aware of the rules of futsal. And to be honest with them, we give them the opportunity to stay on and educate them a little more about the game.
At the end of it all, the goal is to one day have a competitive local futsal league.
Our goal is to have a semi-professional futsal league, and we want to attract sponsors to each team.
Morris says he was impressed with the response of players interested in futsal, and he believes he can also help improve traditional football.
I am looking at the 11-a-side game, because if you go back to Brazil, a lot of the players, Ronaldinho, Ronaldo, even Pelé, I was told, played futsal, which helped them to develop in the 11-a-side game. I think it would definitely help with the development aspect of our players because, you know, we have natural talent, but when we look at it and you bring it down to the, you know, to the nitty-gritty, so to speak, you see where we lack that finishing touch.
Matches in the National Futsal League will take place on May 16th and 22nd, June 5th and 26th, and July 10th and 24th, all at the Central Regional Indoor Facility. Kent Fuentes, C Sports.
Oh, it was a highly anticipated announcement, and now sharpshooting point guard Steph Curry of the Golden State Warriors has won the NBA's regular season Most Valuable Player award. Curry, who set a single-season record for three-pointers scored, also led the Warriors in scoring, assists, and steals, and is the second Warriors player to take the honor, joining Wilt Chamberlain, who won it in 1959-1960. Curry got 100 out of 130 first-place votes from a panel of sport writers and broadcasters throughout the United States and Canada, as well as the fan vote on NBA.com. Other contenders for the award included James Harden from the Rockets, LeBron James from the Cavaliers, Russell Westbrook from the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the Pelicans' Anthony Davis. The 27-year-old guard made 286 three-pointers, breaking his own NBA record of 272, which helped the Golden State achieve a league-leading 67-15 win-loss record for this season. Well, let's get right to it. Tonight's C Sports Salute, but we'll have to let you know that our sports desk is torn between two awesome sporting moments. The first is finding this brilliant run out from the IPL where Dwayne Bravo caught Virat Kohli drifting out of his zone and proceeded to knock down the stumps from his own bowling. From this angle, it's hard to tell, and that's why the umpires asked for help. Kohli had absolutely no chance, run out by a mile. On the other hand, we had to acknowledge local Pro League team St. Anne's Rangers. Their young players fought hard and valiantly throughout the season, which looked doomed to end without a win, but David Williams and the side freighters orchestrated a heist against the Defence Force on the weekend, and for that resilience, we must also recognize them. So it's bravo to Rangers for a share of the C Sports Salute. That's all the time I have for now, but our newscast continues right after the break.
Thank you for staying with us. Board members of the Children's Authority were present today with their instruments of appointment. They were presented today with their instruments of appointment, While the Minister of Gender, Youth and Child Development, Clifton Tokoto, believes it's a major step towards betterment of life for children in the country, the board knows that much still depends on the yet-to-be-proclaimed Children's Bill. Peter Christopher reports.
Vidya Rampasad, Angela Alou, Shannon Marie Russell, Danish Maharaj, Riaz Zabadeen and Chairman Stephanie Daly were presented with their instruments by the Minister of Gender, Youth and Child Development, Clifton Tokoto, on Monday. The three other members of the board, Anna Maria Mora, Dr. Joanne Paul and Dr. Derek Foster, were unable to attend the ceremony. But in handing over the instruments, the board members present were told by the minister that they had to make good on their responsibilities.
The children's legislation, imminent proclamation, will aid you, Madam Chairperson. The board and the Children's Authority is moving forward with evidence-based improvements on a national level, with revised standards and strengthened partnerships with governmental and non-governmental agencies. You must never be perceived as a toothless tiger, nor an absentee landlord.
The authority's chair, Stephanie Daly, acknowledged the responsibility, but said much hinged on the still-to-be-proclaimed Children's Bill.
We've advocated for it for the last 3 years. We've done sensitization, just information sensitization for members of the public based on the provisions that are being introduced into the legislation. For us now, the key issue is when is the proclamation date, because we really would appreciate being able to, to make the necessary preparatory steps then.
Ms. Daly said it was important for the group to maintain its credibility, and she hoped to get off to a productive start with the new team.
We don't want to lose credibility with the public. We've put a lot of energy into trying to make ourselves a trusted authority and to be perceived as people who care about children and put children at the center of everything. And so, of course, we're very concerned that the start-up should come into effect in as smooth a possible manner.
The proclamation of the bill and the planned opening of a child assessment centre at the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex in September have been hailed by the minister as crucial steps in child protection in the country. Peter Christopher, C News.
Interim political leader for the newly formed Tobago Forwards, Chrislyn Moore, says the quiet response towards the Tobago House of Assembly's Auditor General financial statements is of much concern and more needs to be done to get answers. Responding to the financial issues highlighted in the Auditor General's report for the fiscal year 2005 to 2006, Ms. Moore said Tobago's laid-back approach to address the matter is unacceptable and more accountability needs to take place.
Tobagonians, in my view, must be concerned enough, angry enough to agitate for this particular matter to be righted. And this is a matter that, for me, is larger than PNM or Forwards or TOP. This is a matter of public funds. This, to me, is a national issue. And it is alarming that it has not received more attention.
3 men are in the custody of police after a fishing vessel they were aboard was intercepted early this morning by the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. Reports are when the Coast Guard officers drew closer to the vessel named Faithful, the men aboard the vessel began throwing bags overboard. The 3 crocus bags were eventually retrieved from the water by the Coast Guard personnel and contained 64 packets of marijuana with a total weight of 38.1 kilograms and an estimated street value of 500,000 TT dollars. The 3 men and narcotics were handed over to the Organized Crime Narcotics and Firearms Bureau and Customs and Excise Division. Here now are the details of the day's market activity on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange.
Trading on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange today produced a volume of 481,008 shares with a traded value of $2,031,034.88. Trinidad Cement Limited was the volume leader with 395,056 stock units changing hands. Investors bought and sold the stocks of 13 companies with 4 increasing, 1 declining, and 8 ending the day unchanged. The composite and the all TNT indices advanced while the cross-listed index remained the same. And in trading in oil and gas today, oil fell 22 cents, closing the day at US $58.93, while gas went up 5 cents, ending at US $2.82.
With all the heat, I was not surprised when I saw those bushfires, Ian.
Well, yes, so particularly we have a dry, stable atmosphere. We also have quite breezy conditions. They are ideal, basically, for forest fires. I'll give you what the outcome for the rest of the week is, along with some Saharan dust in the air. Today we got a lot of sunshine around, but also a bit of haze, and it is only the forerunner of more dusty conditions to come. It's a large layer of Saharan dust out in the Atlantic, but we'll get to that later. The outlook in terms of rainfall, well, the rain gauge at Piarco has registered no rainfall so far for the month of May, and basically as we go through the next few months into July, we are expecting to see a lot more in terms of those dry conditions, particularly towards northwest Trinidad. If out on that side, it should be slightly drier, probably around 350 or so millimeters. Meanwhile, towards the southwest, basically, there should be wetter than normal conditions. So out towards Port of Spain and Diego Martin and environs, we're looking for a drier outlook for May into July. Meanwhile, if you're down towards the Carcass and down towards the Parish, it should be wetter than normal to start our wet season. But the wet season is still far away from us. We are likely to see a bit more in terms of some cloudiness as we get towards maybe the latter half of May and June. And the only time you'll know that wet season is here is when we get the first tropical wave coming by, or the first arrival of the Intertropical Convergence Zone, the ITCZ. Both of those systems are not in the cards right now, so it seems as though as we go through tonight and tomorrow, mostly dry conditions are expected once more. So Tobago, you'll wake up with not much chance of any sort of rainfall, even across the hills. Probably just a bit more haze, however, as that Saharan dust begins to make inroads across the island here. Meanwhile, down towards Trinidad, it was a hot 34 degrees Celsius today. The average is around 33, but it's not anywhere close to the record, which is actually 35.9. But at least through tomorrow, we should be seeing another hot day. 34 is likely, but there will be a bit more Saharan dust in the air as that forerunner of dust, which will begin to affect us from tonight into tomorrow, will likely extend all the way through the week. That Saharan dust extends from Trinidad all the way across the Atlantic and into Africa. So we could be seeing another 4 or even 5 days of dust as we go through this week. So temperature-wise then, that dust does have an effect, basically keeping temperatures up. 24 degrees Celsius likely in Arima, 26 minimum in Tobago. Tomorrow's high, another 34 in Trinidad and 32 in Tobago. Now through Tobago for the rest of the week, the Saharan haze will remain with us. A lot of dust as well. Obviously, if you do have allergies or asthmatic, definitely you should take some precautions as you go through this week. Heading offshore, we have mostly normal conditions. Just a moderate chop for the most part, 2 meters throughout the Caribbean and the Atlantic. Maybe just getting up to 2.5 further out into the Atlantic if you're going that far. But we'll continue to maintain the choppy, short swells coming in from the east at around 6 seconds. And the winds easterly, the east-northeasterly, about 15 knots, maybe getting up to 20 knots further afield. Now, of course, the Greater Antilles, we've been looking at Cuba recently with a lot of rain and showers there. Could be seeing more showers across in Havana as well. Could be seeing some heavier bursts towards the central highlands of Cuba. So they'll be bracing for even more wet weather over the next few days. So there's heavy rains likely for Havana, not getting higher than 27 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, some of those showers could spill over into parts of western Jamaica. But for the eastern Caribbean, it remains partly sunny all the way from St. Kitts coming down towards St. Lucia. The Saharan haze isn't there quite yet, but it will get there possibly by late tomorrow and going into Wednesday. Meanwhile, the dust will be thick across Bridgetown and coming down towards Georgetown. So for us there, we're likely to see more hot, breezy conditions through tomorrow and into possibly Wednesday. Well, that's your weather. That's it for me. We now have more news with Samantha.
Authorities have identified the suspected gunmen who attacked an event near Dallas exhibiting cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. According to the New York Times and the Washington Post newspapers, officials have named them as Elton Simpson and Nadir Sufi. An FBI official said agents were searching an apartment in Phoenix, Arizona, where Simpson reportedly lived. 2 gunmen were shot dead after opening fire outside Sunday's event. Simpson had been previously investigated on suspicion of terrorism offenses. They drove to the Muhammad art exhibition in the Dallas suburb of Garland as the event was ending, firing with assault rifles on 2 officers in a car park. Chancellor Angela Merkel has come under pressure from her coalition partner to disclose a list of spying targets given to German intelligence BND by the U.S. Vice Chancellor Sigmar Gabriel was responding to claims that the BND had helped the U.S. National Security Agency spy on German firms. Last week, a leaked BND report suggested it had monitored French and EU targets for the NSA. Mrs. Merkel defended the BND in her first public comments on the scandal. Its first priority was to ensure the safety of Germans, she said on Monday, and the government would do all it could to enable the agency to carry out its role. She said this ability to carry out its duties in the face of international terrorism threats is done in cooperation with other intelligence agencies, and that includes first and foremost the NSA. While her office was prepared to respond to all questions, she said striking the right balance was her job. A ship containing toxic chemicals sparked an emergency alert off the coast of the Costa Rica tourist town of Punta Arenas when it sank in heavy seas. The government established an emergency zone along about 100 kilometers and had asked people to avoid swimming and fishing. The ship had been carrying almost 200 tons of ammonium nitrate used in fertilizers and explosives, but a spokesman later said only small traces had been found in the water. Costa Rica's Emergency Commission said bathing was considered safe, but fishing would be banned for a further 72 hours. A reminder of tonight's main stories. A year after Dana Sitahal's murder, her family is still pained and wait for justice. A grieving husband believes his pregnant wife could have been saved if an ambulance was available. A new Children's Authority board is installed. And maxi taxi drivers receive their rebate.
Freedom, opinions, decisions. It's now time for the C News poll.
And now let's check on the results of our poll question. Do you believe Dana Sitahal's murder has become a cold case? Here's how you voted. 80% of you said yes, while 20% of you said no. And this brings us to the end of our C News Report at 7. I'm Samantha John, and for our C News team, have yourself a good night.